This is George from iTech Legion. Today we're going to do something a little bit different. If you're a follower of the channel, you know that typically we never do a versus video, but today we're going to change things up a little bit, and we're actually going to do that in two separate segments. One of the reasons being that we've had a lot of people ask, to see the matchup between the new Corsair pieces and the new Swiftech pieces. The second reason being that the new Corsair pieces are actually a very, very important release. Reason being, the last couple of years, the entire CLC market has been a little bit stagnant. We've had the entire Tech lawsuit thing going on, so we haven't really seen any growth in the field whatsoever in terms of CLCs. Just kind of been the same thing over and over and over again from Tech with a couple of minor releases. But now we're seeing Corsair releases, which is an entirely different animal. Whether you think Corsair is the best or not, they're certainly the most prevalent in the market. So obviously there's something going on here that's going to be a little bit more important than just a minor release. So today we're going to take a look at the H110i GTX versus the H240-X. We're also going to look at the H110i GT versus the H240-X. Now, if you haven't seen our reviews on the H220X and 240X, I'm going to put links down the bottom here. Just click on over, take a look at them, so you're going to have a little bit of what we're talking about as far as these two pieces go, because the in-depth look is going to be at the Corsair pieces today. Okay, now looking at the H110i GT. First off, nice packaging, standard Corsair packaging, black, nice picture on the front. Around the back you do get the specifications. A couple of important things back here. 140 millimeters wide on the radiator, 27 millimeters deep, and it is 322 millimeters long. The other important thing back here we see, fan speed, 2100 RPM. Obviously controllable, will go down. Fan airflow maximum 113 CFM with static pressure of 3.99 millimeters to H2O, and fan noise level of 43 dB. Now, the fan pressure and airflow is actually very, very important. This design is very dependent on it, and we're going to take a look at why. But first, let's look at the overall general view of it. Corsair did a beautiful job with the dress-up kit on this. Now, the H110i GT is actually a cooler piece. It is not an Tech piece, as we saw previously on the H110. So they did make a change there. So this is going to be more similar to the H100i that we saw previously. You've got the square block. Did, like I say, nice job with the dress-up kit. Stays with the Corsair look, nice silver logo, light up Corsair logo in the center, RGB controlled through Corsair Link. On the bottom, we do have, now they're saying they improved the cold plate. Obviously, we're not going to pull it apart, take a look, but it is a nicely milled copper cold plate, as you see here, very large. Two tubes, of course, are flexible, movable, and you've got nice flex to the tubing. You've also got an outside cover on the tube, which is really great looking. I mean, I have no trouble telling you, this and the H100i GTX are the two nicest looking CLCs I've seen to date. No doubt about that. So you do have some movability, like I say, easier mounting. Now on the sides, as you see, you've actually got the Corsair logo with a nice silver plate, so it's going to be really nice looking in the case. Now looking at the radiator itself, this is why I'm saying that those fan specs are going to be just so important. Now, copper has about twice the U value, which is thermal conductivity of aluminum. Now, the Swiftech uses a brass and copper radiator, with the copper being about 12 to 13 FPI. Now, the Corsair, the H110i GT, is an all-aluminum radiator and runs, I measured it out to sometimes 20, sometimes 21. There is a little variance, so call it 20 and a half FPI. So theoretically speaking, you've got about the same amount of capability as far as dissipation. So kind of a standoff there. Very little variance. But you are going to have a big difference in how it's done, in that with a much denser fin array, you are going to need much higher pressure fans, and it's going to take a lot more air to get that dissipation going. So the high speed, high CFM, high static fans are a necessity, especially the static. It's much more difficult to get air through the dense array than it is through a lower FPI radiator. If you look at discrete pieces, you're going to see that lower FPI pieces are made for slower fan speeds. higher FPI pieces require higher fan speeds and, once again, more airflow, I should say, and more static pressure. But along with that is going to come more noise, of course, and there's just no way around that. So that is why you've got the ultra high speed, ultra high static, high CFM fans included. Now taking a look at them, they are the SP120Ls, built off the standard SP, use the same basket, there's no ring on them. You know, just kind of a not as pretty SP140 is what it really boils down to. You know, kind of an OEM version of it. Still, nice looking fan, no question about that. Well built. They do have a little bit of bearing noise, we found, no question about that. And cable coming off, 4-pin cable. Now, we did do an install video for the H110i GT. I find the link to it right below, so you can take a look at how it goes in. Install kit was actually very nicely done. No question, you know, that it was easy to put in. No problems whatsoever. As far as install, you know, the Swiftech versus the Corsair, it's really a wash. 6 in one, half dozen the other. Both went in very easily. Both very, very professional install kits. But now, where do you see the differences? Okay, we talked about the radiator difference. You know, and you've got copper brass, low FPI, allowing for lower noise. And you've got the all aluminum, higher FPI, going to need more airflow to get the same job done. So, you know, you've got that going there. Next, you know, I mean, of course, you know, the Swiftech has the advantage of being expandable. You want to add a GPU, not a problem. Want to add a really cool tube reservoir, not a problem. Want to change out your tubes to a color that matches your build, not a problem. Once again, want to go with clear tubes, put in a liquid, you know, that matches your build along with a really cool tube reservoir, not a problem. Swiftech's got you covered. Corsair is CLC, closed loop cooler. It's closed, it's done, it's sealed. So, not happening there. But conversely, Swiftech is guaranteed for 3 years, 6-year warranty on the Corsair. The Swiftech is going to require maintenance after 3 years, and may require maintenance along the way. But maintenance in this case is really going to be the case of, well, I had to take the plug out of the side and put a little distilled water in it and put the plug back in. That's your first 3 years of maintenance. Yeah, after 3 years, you should drain it, you should change the tubes, clean it up, refill it and re-bleed. But, you're talking 3 years down the road. But obviously the CLC's got the advantage in that case, but, it's not the advantage that most people make it out to be. Now, as far as the pump goes, Corsair doesn't actually have any of their specs on their pumps. Never been able to find any. We've seen some independent tests on it that show it being anywhere from, about 0.15 gallons per minute up to 0.25 gallons per minute, depending on whether it's a Swiftech or an Acetech, or I should say a Cooler or an Acetech pump, and some variances even within that. Whereas the Swiftech is using a gallon per minute pump with obviously a good amount of head pressure being able to add on. The head pressure obviously won't affect it in this case, but if you're adding on, it obviously will. But the flow rate is a huge effect. We've seen in many, many builds and seen it time and time again, when you drop below right about a half a gallon a minute, performance starts to degrade pretty quickly. So the gallon per minute pump on the Swiftech obviously is going to be far superior to the pump we're finding on the Corsair. But, depending on, once again, the restriction in the radiator and whatnot, it may not come into play. I mean, that number does drop down from 0.5 gallons per minute, obviously, depending on the restriction of the rest of the loop. So it may not come into play, but, we saw with the Corsair, or the Cooler Master Neptune series, when they went up to a half gallon a minute pump, they had markedly better performance and were able to use slower fans for less noise. So, we're going to see how it plays out. And now we're going to take a look at the system that we used for this test. And nothing's really extravagant here, as you see. One of the big things, we went into a Fantex Enthu Lux, and it's completely stock Lux. 200 millimeter intake in the front, 140 millimeter exhaust in the back. With the air cooler, obviously, there's nothing up top, running exhaust with the Corsair and the Swiftech up top, and we tested it in a number of ways. On the 4770K with a Sabertooth motherboard. Now let's take a look at the coolers that we tested here, and also the different testing we did. Looking at the coolers, we did just as a stock tests. You see basically all the major competitors to these two in their respective class. Now also we tested just the Swiftech and just the Corsair. A lot of people are saying, oh well, I changed the the fans on my CLC to a Noctua, and suddenly I got 20-degree better temps, and that doesn't make a whole lot of sense. You're cutting down the CFM, you're cutting down the static pressure, and you're getting less airflow through a dense radiator, and you're not going to gain performance. What you're going to gain is actually noise to performance. At the same noise level, you're going to get markedly better performance switching out to a Noctua fan, but just not to leave anything to chance. We did everything, we did the Corsairs, I should say, and the Swiftech using Noctua fans as a control. We also did push and pull on the Corsairs. We did simply pull on the Swiftech because that's how it mounts. So we basically ran the gamut of tests. Now we're also measuring a number of different ways. We're going to look at the actual number of the CPU, what it maxed out at as far as temperature and averaged out to. We're going to look at how loud they were. We're going to look at the in-case temp to CPU temp delta. So the actual air intake temperature into the cooler itself, to the CPU, and the delta between. That's going to show the actual efficiency of the cooler and take the case completely out of the equation. Also going to take the ambient temp out of the equation, etc. We're also going to do the ambient to CPU temp delta, which leaves the case in the temp, but people do like to see that number, so we're going to put that in there. But first, I do want to take a look at the noise testing. So let's cut over to that and take a look at exactly what these two sound like. On the H240X, with the fans and pump all the way up, we're topping out right around 48 dB. At full fan and pump speed, the H110i GT is running just under 60 dB, but as you can hear, the tone of it, it's pretty unlivable in the room. Okay, now we can dig into the test results, and we do have quite a few to go through here. A couple things I do want to mention. As the stress test, we did use AiO CPU plus FPU. 15 minutes in, we did an average on the cores, and that is going to be the result. And now also, one thing I do want to explain here. A lot of people are going to say, well, where's the H110? I did not have an H110 on hand. However, I do want to point out there is an NZXT X61 in here. That is the newer generation of the same unit that the H110 is. It's the same Acetec piece. So obviously you've got a newer generation of the H110 in here, just with slightly different fans. So really that kind of answers that question right there. Now, first chart we're looking at here, core temps actual. The room was 22.2 degrees as tested, all climate controlled. So now taking a look here, the Corsair H110i GT, we ran it in push and in pull. And taking a look, the numbers aren't that far off from the Swiftech. 69 degrees on the cores in both push and pull, to 66 on the Swiftech, and obviously the H110i best of the CLCs without a problem, also besting the Noctua air cooler by a few degrees. But the other number you do have to look at here is that dB number, 59 dB. It is louder than everything else in the test with the exception of the old H100i, and it's really by a sizable margin over the H240-X. You're looking at an extra 11 dB, as we just saw in the noise testing. So, that's a big consideration. Now, moving on, taking a look, just the same results expressed in deltas. Obviously, like I say, same results. You're seeing, the core temp, and you're just seeing the delta, between the ambient outside air and the core itself. And once again, the differences remain the same. Now, moving to the next chart. Cooler intake delta. This is actually a measurement of the air at the intake point of the cooler compared to the CPU core. So you get the actual efficiency of the cooler itself without any outside effects. So looking at that, actually you get, once again, 2 to 3 degrees difference than the Swiftech. H240X. So, things are staying pretty even there, and actually pulls away a bit from the air cooler, and really, looking good as far as that goes. But again, the noise factor is the problem there. Now, moving over, quieting things down, You see what happens, I was talking about the high FPI radiator and exactly what happens, when you starve it for air. And this is exactly what we're going to see here. We brought the fans down to a level where the actual output was less than 40 dB, so it's livable. You can sit next to it without wanting to bang your head against the wall or anything from all the noise coming out of it. And you can see that the H110i GT at 1340 RPM is much more effective than the Swiftech. Swiftech goes up a degree. The Corsair jumps 4 degrees up. So you've got a big 6-degree difference there at like noise levels. That's, obviously a bit more than just a couple of degrees, and, something definitely to take into consideration. Like I say, as far as noise performance, the CLC is definitely going to suffer with that aluminum high FPI radiator. But, looking through, even the big Noctua does do a better job of cooling, and it's 7 dB lower than the H110i GT, and that's using stock fans. So we moved over, you've heard, I'm sure, from 1,000 people that, oh, I changed the Noctuas and the temperatures dropped and, it was so much quieter. Well, it's definitely going to be quieter. There's no question about that. As far as the temperatures dropping, again, the high FPI radiator, it needs a lot of airflow. It needs a lot of static pressure. Dropping airflow into a high FPI radiator is never going to improve performance. It's just the way it is. It's a fact. It's physics. So we put the Noctuas on there. We ran them in push. We ran them in pull, because you've heard people say there's huge differences in push and pull as well, I'm sure. Now you take a look. Does the performance improve? Of course not. Like we say, it's not going to happen. But it just goes up a tick, a couple of degrees. But the thing that does improve, the noise to performance improves dramatically. You're still 5 degrees off from the Swiftech, but you're a little bit quieter than the Swiftech. Now the Swiftech itself, with the Noctuas on it, you don't see a difference, as far as noise or as far as performance. But on the H110i GT with a pair of Noctuas, you get decent performance, very good performance at livable noise levels. So it does change the character of the cooler entirely. It's not going to catch up to something like the H240-X, but like I say, it does change it considerably. But it also changes the price tag considerably. A pair of the Noctuas on the H110i GT, you're looking at about $190 price tag for a CLC, and that just doesn't make a whole lot of sense, especially when you compare it to something like Swiftech at $149. So definitely something to consider there. But all in all, the H110i GT did do a much better job than I was expecting it to do compared to the H240X, and obviously is the best performing CLC out there right now. Couple things I did want to point out. First off, I did say that the H110i GT has a 6-year warranty. It's actually a 5-year warranty. I made a mistake on that. Also, I wanted to point out that it is Intel and AMD compatible, LGA 1150 series, 1366 and 2011, as well as AM2, AM3, and FM1, FM2. All right, so now we got to look at the numbers. If you're just going by the numbers, there's really kind of a no contest. The Swiftech obviously cooled better overall, was much quieter doing it. Now you go into, the expandability, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, and it's kind of like, with a CLC, you're bringing a knife to a gunfight, as far as this matchup goes. There's really no question about that. The open loop cooler, with the better pump, better radiator, et cetera, is, it's gonna be better than a CLC. There's just no way around it. But with that, like I say, you also have maintenance involved with Swiftech, which you don't have with the Corsair. But now, I am actually more impressed with the Corsair than I thought I was going to be. The H110i GT actually did come up as the just about the best CLC we ever tested. I didn't get a chance to test it against the Thermal Take Water 3.0 Ultimate, but going by the numbers that we did get and comparison units we've done in the past, it's going to be right about on par with that. So you've got a really nice unit here with the H110i GT. Does very, very well for itself. But, the trade-off again being it's really loud doing it. It's significantly louder than the Water 3.0 Ultimate is, and it's also quite a bit louder than the NZXT X61, so which is also a 280 millimeter, and the performance on it is only a touch better. So you've got some trade-offs. I've said in the past that Corsair has a lot of noise problems with that high FPI rad, and the fact that their fans aren't very quiet, and the combination does make for a bad noise performance problem. But I mean, it's something that, if you can live with the noise, when you're actually, doing something, video editing or CAD work or, anything of that nature, it's really going to put a stress on the CPU, for those short periods. The H110i GT is really a nice way to go, especially if you're doing a Corsair build. It's a great looking cooler. Looks good in the case. Under normal, idling type circumstances, it's behaved as far as the noise level. It's, not the quietest thing we've ever heard, that's for sure, but it's certainly not the noisiest, at lower loads. So it's not a bad way to go. With that said, and the fact that, the H110i GT does, do a great job of cooling overall, I'm going to give it a High-Tech Legion Gold Award. Like I say, the only knock really being, the noise level. Also, the price point, $139, $10 more, you're into the Swiftech. That becomes, pretty problematic. You're getting so much more for $10. So I think Corsair also needs to look at the price points on these, and start accommodating, really relatively, what it should be. So with that, like I say, the H110i GT is going to get a High-Tech Legion Gold Award. Definitely stepped up more than I thought it was going to against the H240-X. Couldn't quite catch it, as we said, but definitely did a respectable job for itself.